You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
We're standing outside Senate House, an Art Deco-inspired structure designed by architect Charles Holden. The building opened in 1937 as part of the University of London, with the American Rockefeller Foundation funding its construction. When Senate House was built, it was one of the tallest buildings in the city. This is certainly not the only structure by Holden to be seen around the town. In the late 1920s, he created 55 Broadway, which served for decades as a headquarters for the London Underground. You could see a similar sort of stair-step construction in that building, a feature that allowed light to reach all parts of the structure. And much like Senate House, 55 Broadway was a pioneering building, sometimes referred to as London's first skyscraper. We see, then, that Holden is known for structures that tower far above the ground, but he first made his name in the subterranean world. Even before the 55 Broadway Commission, Holden had a working relationship with Frank Pick, the managing director of the London Underground, through commissions for the design of underground stations. Holden's work is especially to be seen on the Piccadilly line. With Pick, he was responsible for modernizing the design of the stations, giving them an instantly recognizable look. And, as is characteristic of modern design, the form and function were inseparable, with the form guiding users throughout the building. However, as can be expected for structures so out of the ordinary, Holden's work tended to elicit quite strong reactions. That reception was anticipated by Sir William Beveridge, who was the Vice-Chancellor for the University of London at the time Senate House was conceived, and later the architect of the British welfare state. Beveridge said of Senate House's design that, quote, "It should be something that could not have been built by any earlier generation than this, and can only be at home in London." While Beveridge envisioned that the modernity of the building would testify to the modernity of the university, prominent architectural critic Nicholas Pevsner, who went on to create the popular Pevsner architectural guides, was less certain about the building's modernist credentials. Like many supporters of modernism in Germany, Pevsner had relocated to Britain in the 1930s. There he declared that the modernism of Senate House was in fact, quote, "a strangely traditional, undecided modernism." You can see that it indeed differs from contemporary projects such as the Lawn Road Flats by Wells Coates that were more obviously inspired by continental modernists, such as Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe. While Pevsner refers to an uncertain modernism, a new sort of uneasiness about Senate House set in during the Second World War. In that period, Senate House was used as the headquarters for the Ministry of Information, following that governmental department's formation at the start of the war. Because of its responsibility for creating propaganda, the Ministry of Information came to represent the special use of language as a weapon of war in that conflict, and it employed a variety of writers in some capacity, including Graham Greene, Dylan Thomas, and Elizabeth Bowen. Although the Ministry of Information was dissolved in 1946, it, along with Senate House, lived on in literature. To give you one famous example, George Orwell's wife worked in the censorship department during the war, and we can see evidence of Senate House in the way Orwell describes the Ministry of Truth in his famous book, 1984. As part of that dystopian novel, Orwell seems to be nodding to architectural modernism and the close connection between architectural form and ideology in the movement's early days. We thus read from the point of view of the future. In the early 20th century, the vision of a future society unbelievably rich, leisured, orderly, and efficient, a glittering antiseptic world of glass and steel and snow-white concrete, was part of the consciousness of nearly every literate person. However, we see this very aesthetic become wrapped up in warfare when we discovered what's happened to this glittering glass and steel and concrete architecture. We read, "The ideal set up by the party was something huge, terrible, and glittering, a world of steel and concrete, of monstrous machines and terrifying weapons." In Orwell's nonfiction from around that time, we see him voice the same concerns about the political work done by architectural form, as the perceived centralization of authorities seemed to extend into the architectural templates for daily life. For example, in Orwell's 1946 essay, The Prevention of Literature, he imagines a future in which books are planned by bureaucrats, which would lead literature as the world knew it to vanish. But he writes that architecture might in fact find tyranny beneficial. We thus discover that it wasn't just the Ministry of Information that was suspect for Orwell. It was also the style of the building in which the MOI was situated during the war. To draw all this together, in Senate House, we see a building created to fulfill the ambitions of Beveridge, an intellectual and political figure who would go on to envision one of the biggest triumphs of post-war planning, the British welfare state, the institutions of which in turn offered work to a number of prominent modernist architects. In Orwell's telling, though, Senate House transforms into a cautionary tale about what happens when language itself is subject to state planning.